Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to On Your Other Side, Leadership After Transition. Before I introduce our guest, I want to tell you, I know I get real excited. My eyes get wide open and my hands go crazy. Why wouldn't I? Do you know how much joy I get from sitting here in front of this computer, doing these interviews week in and week out with amazing people that are sharing stories, not only with you, but they're sharing with me. I learn so much from every guest we have, and today is going to be no exception. I'm excited. I get to bring on a guy in which I actually, in this very room, James Van Pruyen, VP for what I call him, because I always say his name wrong, Pruyen. I'm from New York, so I say it wrong. But VP, the founder of the Military Podcast Network, was sitting in this room talking to our guest, John Krotec, through the same exact thing that we're doing now. And I got to meet him. And for 2 years, we've been working on getting here. So, well, 2 years is out and we're here. So John, welcome. How you doing, brother?
Hey, brother. Thanks, Jeff, for that introduction. And yeah, James is an amazing person, but these interviews are like fine wine. So I'm looking at this interview as, a Merlot or something. It may have taken us a couple of years. Some people wait decades to get something, but this is such a treat. And I'm really honored to be here on your show. And yeah, it did take a couple of years, but we're here now. So
And we're going to get to it, man, because I don't want to waste the time. I want to make sure we're in. But, I got to tell you, John, what I've seen from you over the past 2 years, even before VP introduced you, that you have a pretty good social media presence. So you're around. I get to see even before he introduced us, I had seen some things that you were doing, heard of some things you were doing. And then since we met, I've got to see you everywhere. It's almost if you're not on LinkedIn, you're on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook, you're on Instagram. I mean, there's just your name is synonymous with social media and we'll talk about some of the things that you're doing because they're everywhere, which is great. It's just an awesome thing because the things in which you're doing, man, they're so helpful. It shows that continued service. It shows that desire to get out there and actually help and do meaningful things, kind of like we talked prior to the show. And we'll get into some of that because it was wonderful. But it's just those things that people need. It's you and I are connected because we do like things. We're doing things for others and kind of removing ourselves from it. And it's just enjoyable. So I'll tell you what, just to get started, give me a little bit of history of your military service. You're an Army veteran, served a few years, 3 years, but tell me kind of what you came in and you wanted to, and tell me what your job was and stuff like that. And kind of tell me, just give me that short glimpse of what you did in the military.
Absolutely. I came from a military family. My dad was a United States Army officer, 28 years, colonel. All of his family members were either in the Army or the Navy. His brothers and sisters, all 7 of them served the country. My mom's side, not so much. There wasn't not much military, but I kind of went backwards. I went to college first, and then I was in the restaurant business. Wasn't really working for me. I was partying way too much, and I was looking at myself in the mirror after a few years of that, and I'm like, is this what my life is going to be like? I was 26 years old, and I'm like, if I don't serve my country now, I'm never going to do it. Mm. And so at 26 years old with my college degree, I went down, took the ASVAB. Of course, I scored pretty good like most of us do. And I picked out what I thought sounded really cool, 54 Bravo, which is NBC, right? This is going to be really cool. And so I went in 1986, was like right after Grenada and right before the first Gulf War. I went in as a PFC. They wanted me to go in warrant officer in food service because that was what my major was in college. And I said, no, I don't want any of that. So I went in as a PFC, 26 years old. And immediately, basic training is I went to Fort Jackson and I was a squad leader right off the bat. And then the platoon leader that they had in basic was a Navy veteran in an Army basic training. And so I found myself as the platoon leader in basic training. And that was interesting, basically, because I was 26 amongst 17, 18, 19-year-old guys. Yeah. The other guy, his last name was Stover. The Navy guy was about 35 years old, so he was a bit older. So we got through that, and then I went to AIT at Fort McClellan, Alabama, Army Chemical School. We were the first group to go through live agent training in the United States Army. And then I got assigned to the 4th Infantry Division at Fort Carson, Colorado. And I was like, hell yeah. Because I like being outdoors. And So I showed up there, and of course, PT the first day, I thought I was going to die because you're at altitude.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm really not this weak, but I couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I did my time at Fort Carson, 1986 through 1989. I went to PLDC there. My last year, 1989, I was the distinguished graduate of PLDC. Made sergeant stripes because of my college fairly quick. 22 months, I was an E5, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I absolutely loved, of course, coming from a military family. My chain of command, didn't matter who the leaders were, they really took care of us. General Reimer was the general, I think went on to be general of the Army, but he was the division commander. And I just really excelled. I loved it. And it's not even to brag, because we know they don't give away things if you don't earn them, but in 3 years of active duty, I received 3 AAMs. For those of you who don't know, Army Achievement Medals, 2 ARCOMs, Army Commendation Medals, and then my final award was a Meritorious Service Medal after 36 months of active duty. And I was real proud of that. As a matter of fact, I was also in the Iron Horse Club. Colin Powell signed the orders. That was pretty cool. Oh, yeah. And then I got out, and I was home for about 3 months, and my first sergeant called me, and he said, "Hey, Sergeant Krotec, we have a line and a paragraph number. We want you to come back." And I'm like, "Well, Top, what's going on?" And he says, "I can't tell you, but we're painting the tracks for the desert." So this was like several months before the invasion of Kuwait. And I'm thinking, okay, I go down to the recruiter, and they go, and I'm a 54 Bravo. They were worried about Scud missiles and all that. And they said, "No prior service, but we can give you this, this, and this, and this." Well, Special Forces seemed rather, exotic, but 56 weeks of training or whatever it is, the war would be over, whatever's going on. And then, so what I did is I re-enlisted. I went back in the 81st ARCOM, which was headquartered out of, I think, Fort Lauderdale at the time. I was the NBC NCO in a field artillery unit. And it was 8-inch guns, and that was just pretty incredible to stand behind the grab the lanyard, and those guys were all laughing, but I fired off my first round, I popped the cherry, and you could stand behind the tubes and watch these shells. And I'm thinking, these artillery people are crazy and devastating at the same time. So I did a year of that. And then I got out, and the rest of the time, of course, we went nowhere. We got 2 of our batteries got deployed for Hurricane Andrew. And that was kind of as close as I got to any kind of deployment. But I got out and spent the rest of the time in the IRR. So the Gulf War, I remember my first sergeant called me after it was all over, and he says, "John, you didn't miss anything." He said, "As a matter of fact, all we did was grave registration for the enemy and help with putting out these fires that the enemy had started." And he said, "You may have been the guy that got sick or stepped on something. So you did your duty. Be proud of what you did." And I just really honored to have been able to serve my country. I'm pretty much intact, and I'm just real blessed to be here.
Yeah. So when you actually decided to get out, when it was coming up at a time whether you re-enlisted and stayed active duty, as you started to go through that transition, what are some of the things that you can recall were you prepared to exit the military? What was that feeling like for you? Did you know what you wanted to do? Were you situated in a manner that you could do it? Did you plan properly? Did the Army provide you the exit strategy that you needed? What was that process like for you?
Well, back in 1989, it's different. Of course, I was in a reserve unit. Now, the reserves have changed. We know that a lot of those guys and people have been deployed several times. But back when I was in 1989 and in the reserves in 1990, it was a little bit different. Going from an active duty Army into a reserve unit, it was just different. All the active duty guys that had been in the real Army, we call it the real Army, but that we all kind of hung together. And then the reservists were a little bit, it was just a different culture. And it was like a clash of culture. So the reserves was great. I loved the reserves, but it wasn't really for me. So what I knew I had a college degree, and now I knew that I had Army behind me. I knew that I could be an asset to anywhere. I wasn't worried about what I was going to do. So I got out, came back to Sarasota, Florida, and I found I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So what I did was I was painting condos out on the beach. But if you've ever been to Sarasota with the white sand, not a bad job.
No.
So I got reacquainted with the woman that I had known a decade earlier, and we hit it off and decided, well, you know what? I think I'm going to go back in and make a career out of it. And I wanted to go do. I talked about SF, and there was a hardship tour associated with that, and we weren't ready for that yet. So we decided to go into business with each other, and that's what we did. We opened up a specialty retail store selling high-end backpacking and camping and those types of things. We saw a need for it. I had experience with that. And so we opened that, and it lasted 23 years. It was a good ride.
Outstanding.
But the Army at that time in 1989, I think we turned in all the TA-50, with the GS people, and, kind of went through that process. And I think the out process at that time in 1989 was very minimal. Yeah. I think it might have been a 1-hour course. This is what's going on, and these are your benefits. And it was a lot of civilians teaching us. They did a fine job, but no, you were pretty much turned out on the streets. And, I went from having, all my buddies with my company, and the next thing, I'm back home and there's nobody there. There's none of your buddies there. But I guess they prepared me for as well as they could. That's changed a lot with all the conflict, but I kind of mentally knew, and anyhow, it worked out great for me. It really did. I met the woman of my life, and then we opened up the business, and we did that for over 2 decades.
Yes, sir. So, it's interesting. So you talk about 1989, and, I retired in 17. While I was going through retirement, the transition process in itself, I was reaching out and talking to a whole bunch of folks that got out back in 2010, 2005. And I was talking to a guy that actually helped revamp a program in 2001. And it was interesting because he retired in 1995. And the process in 95 was much different than 2001 that he revamped. Well, 2001 is much different than 2019. And I'm sure 1989 was much different. It's just, there's a substantial amount of lessons learned, and people taking leading and leaning towards a better transition, if you will. And, it's not 100%. But hell, the fact is, a young guy getting out of the military, they're not really trying. It's more of a check the block, and why the hell am I sitting here listening to 5 days worth of crap? I just want to get out. So are they really listening? So, there's goods and bads, there's pros and cons, but just like any Army school, if it's 40-hour block of instruction, you're not supposed to be the expert, but you're supposed to get it and then go and move and give a little bit of self effort, make some effort and do good for yourself. Real quick, just want to say what's up to James. He stopped in to say what's up, brother. And Aaron Martin, they said what's up. They just saying hello. Hey, welcome to the show. Hope you guys are enjoying it. Hey, so what I'm going to ask John. So you decided to open up a business, but before I really want to get into what you're doing, what you did for those years, what you're doing now, but I want to ask you if you could give advice to someone that's transitioning, what would that be?
Well, one thing, I was very fortunate, with my time in the military. All the leaders that I had were phenomenal leaders, even from the platoon, element all the way up to the brigade. And they gave me an opportunity to excel. We talked about some of the awards and all that. So in PLDC, I left the Army with some really good instruction and some really good training. And so when I got out, and as we all know that have made the transition, I realized very quickly that we had kind of an edge, because those traits, and you may not even realize it, but even as a PF, lower ranking soldier or airman or sailor, the things that you're learning maybe by symbiosis, those things give you an edge. And so the transition was kind of cool, because when I got out into the workforce, it was like, we got this. And I was in a peacetime Army. So all I can say with the people we've interviewed on Straight Outta Combat, those transitioning soldiers and sailors and airmen and women today, wow, they have got an incredible edge if they only realize it. And they could be a benefit to any company or organization they go to work for. So my advice would be this: look at yourself in the mirror and tell that person in the mirror that you got what it takes to do anything that the civilian business world throws at you. You do that every morning. as long as it takes. Start believing that.
Yep.
Because the skill sets that the U.S. military trained you with give you a distinct advantage and make you a valuable asset to the society. I love that. It gives me goosebumps, Jeff, just to think about it, because, and like you said, not every veteran is, but even those veterans that we might not think that way, the skill sets that we learn from actual hands-on to just being in a platoon or in, I don't know what the other, militaries have, but just those skill sets that you have, use them and realize you have them and believe in yourself. So the only advice I'd say is look in the mirror and tell that person, you got this.
Yep.
Because you do have it.
Yep. Interesting. I like that. And I like it because a lot of folks that I've talked to on the other side that aren't military veterans or anything, but they're hiring managers and they never served. It says, through the veterans that they've hired or whatnot, they said it's funny because we need them. Sometimes we just don't know that we need them, and they're not showing us why we need them. I mean, the idea is there that we need them, and they're going to show up early. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. All that stuff is there in theory, but they got to show us. So when they come to the interviews or when they're even the application process, the networking ability, but just those conversations, kind of have to know what is it? What value are you bringing? You know what I mean? As you come out, it's kind of having the ability to speak about what you can do, because we're so used to, I mean, whether you've been in for 3 years, 10 years, 25 years, what can you do? And the constant answer is whatever you need me to, because that's what we do. I mean, we get there and we're able to do whatever. We're never asked really, what can we do with PCS or go to the next job? And that's just what we're going to do. So when you get to an interview or you get to someone that's wanting to hire you as from a job perspective, when they ask, what are your skills or what can you do? It's a very difficult question to answer, because it's easy to say, what do you need? Because whatever you need, if you give me a little bit of training, I'm going to take it a long way. Right. And so it's just an interesting concept, but I believe what you're saying is spot on, brother.
Well, even like, take, for instance, an infantryman, he might be thinking to himself, I don't have anything to offer. I can zero. Well, we had, 50s and we had M60s. We can do these to the weapons. And all I was trained to do that job, an infantryman. How does that relate to the civilian world? Well, let me see. About teamwork, about diversity, about commitment, about sacrifice. You have other qualities that most people in the civilian world takes years to develop. Think of a 25-year-old E5 that's got $11 million of equipment under his belt that he needs to take care of, plus lives that he's looking out for.
Yep.
The responsibility set of values that 25-year-old E5 learns, that college kid that was me at 26 didn't know jack.
Yep.
So that's a huge benefit and value. Another thing too, Jeff, what I recommend to transitioning people is to read.
Yeah.
Read. There's so many good books out there about the civilian business world or about business. And see, a lot of people that transition don't know about business.
Right.
So just read, there's so many good books. I mean, my gosh. Well, I didn't know that much about, I knew about management a little bit, but read, be a glutton, be hungry for information.
Yeah.
So look in the mirror and read a lot of books.
Yeah.
Don't stay at home, get out there and make it happen. And if you're in a dark place, that's another bit of advice, because a lot of veterans reach out to somebody. You're not weak, or, it doesn't take away your knuckle dragging persona if you call somebody if you need help. And that goes for the ladies. It goes for the guys. If you're in a place and it doesn't feel good, call somebody.
No doubt.
Say, hey, what are you doing now? Or what, track them down, look for them, because sometimes that little 15-minute phone call can make all the difference in your world that day. So, reach out, call, read, and look in the mirror. And don't look in the mirror, all day long. Just, in the morning and go.
I love it.
I've cracked a couple mirrors, man, looking at it.
But I love it. I love the idea. I mean, just the idea of calling. I mean, there's a lot of folks that do have those things, whether in a dark place, but they just don't know that they can. But it's important. Reach out. That's awesome. Good advice, man. Hey, so I'm going to ask you what you currently do. And while I'm asking that, and obviously you can expand on the business from upon exiting to now, and then what you're currently doing. But I want you to keep in your mind, I'm going to ask the very next question is, I'm going to ask you what qualities do you think that the military gave you, or at least kind of honed in on and pushed to the forefront that allowed you to be successful in your current situation. So just kind of keep that in your mind as you're going and talk about the things that you, as you've left the military to where you are now. So yeah, give us a story, man. So you exit the military, you decide you see your wife, or you see the girl, you guys reconnect and you start business together and go from there.
We reconnected. You know, I was, you know, at that time going on 30 years ago. And my wife had 2 kids from a previous marriage. They were young. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't real sure if I wanted to marry somebody with an instant family. I mean, that's a huge responsibility. And I wanted to make sure we could afford it. So we looked around and we decided to go into business. I wasn't going to go back into the Army. So we opened up the backpacking, camping, travel store. And I got to tell you, I borrowed $25,000 from my mom and dad, $25K, that was it. Mm-hmm. And she put in $25,000. So we opened our business for $50,000. Mm-hmm. And we were profitable every single year, but a couple out of 23 years. Mm-hmm. And that was because of the mortgage debacle in 2007. Yeah. But within 4 years, we were grossing over $1 million a year out of 3,300 square feet. I was running trips to South America. We were selling, it was just an awesome feeling. We went from 1,900 square feet to 2,700 square feet to 3,300 square feet. And the business really just took off. And I had it all figured out till my head bump in 2012, which led to what I'm doing now. It's kind of I suffered a TBI in 2012 and a motor vehicle accident with alcohol involved. And what it really did was it altered the course of my life. And by the way, James is a great guy, and he's the guy that connected us. But I like to say I network, but not nearly as good as James. That was a little sidebar there. But what came out was 42 years of a dirty, dark secret. You know, I had been assaulted as a young boy and basically just shelved it for a long time. And then the traumatic brain injury brought all that out. It was pretty horrific, mood swings, sleep deprivation. I had friends leaving me left and right. And then within 4 years, I had my wife leaving me. And the universe intervened. Her mother at 91 slipped and fell and broke her shoulder and her hip. And my wife had to go back to Virginia to take care of her mother. And it gave me 60 days of silence during the holidays. So I realized after 60 days that I did not want to go down that route of divorce, which we were already embroiled in. And I drove all the way up there the day before Christmas, 2015, and knocked on her door Christmas morning. And she was like, John, it's not working. You're stalking me now. This marriage is over. And I had been told by an attorney, when you hear the word stalk, it's time to get out of Dodge. So I got back in my truck, drove all the way to Jacksonville, Florida, from just south of Richmond. And we were smoking and joking about this, but I checked into the Holiday Inn Express right off the interstate on the Beltway in Jacksonville. And it was only a lady that worked in the restaurant and me there that night. And I had no sleep all night long. Next morning I get up, I call a crisis center while I'm on the interstate. They talked me off the ledge, got me into treatment, 24 weeks of cognitive behavioral therapy, 3 to 4 months of speech pathology, and then 6 or 7 months of hemp treatments to help me get the brain right. And it wasn't easy. There were many, many dark nights here at my house in the backyard where I have my prayer circle and my fire ring, lots of tears, lots of, what am I going to do now? Mm-hmm. How am I going to figure this out? And my wife, of course, was up in Virginia. So after a year, I received on November 16th, 2016, one of the nicest letters I've ever received in my life. It was a card from my wife. And she said, I've seen a huge change in you, John. I let her go. I had to let her go. But that whole year we stayed in contact. And she says, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And so that was good news. So it gave me a foundation to rebuild my life again.
Can I interrupt you real quick, John? I apologize. And I just want to say, so what I really have enjoyed about you through a bunch of different things that I've listened to is your genuineness, right? You're very just open, you're transparent, but you're sincere. And I got to tell you, just the fact that you can say on November 16th, I got the greatest letter in the world, and it's from your wife pretty much asking you to get married again. I mean, it's the proposal from 20 plus years before. I mean, it's just it's a heartwarming story, and you tell it. I mean, I just love it. I wanted to interrupt because I'm sitting here thinking to myself, man, it's a great story, and I appreciate it. But please continue, man.
Well, thank you for that, Jeff. I really realized at that moment how truly special our spouses can be. And sometimes, I got to tell you, that woman, my wife, went through hell with me after the accident up until the time she decided she wanted to leave me. And I wasn't physically abusive. I would never do that, but I was emotionally abusive. And that's what happens when you have an injury and you have dark secrets that you've never been able to deal with, even at 57. So that, thank you, Jeff, for recognizing that. And, that she gave me the foundation to start over. And what we're doing now, we're doing Green Zone Hero. And Green Zone Hero is a business directory of companies that honor freedom. And people go, what does that mean? And what that means is if you're a company or an organization, veteran or non-veteran owned, we're a subscription-based B2B business directory. Join our company, and we will give you more tools for more exposure. We will give you some digital things that can help you. Proven strategies will connect the dots with certain people and organizations. And we started that basically. I knew nothing about business directories, but I learned very quickly. And when we got Harley Davidson to endorse us, after month 3, I said, I think we're on to something. And then Sam Ash Music, and then Mission Barbecue, and then, Boar's Head Provisions, the Community Health Network, all these big companies started coming in, and even the mom and pop shops. And they saw what we were doing. And, the renewal rate's 61%, which is pretty decent for a startup. And we started building that brand. And it's, we're working on website development, make it more user-friendly. And these are all things that I'm learning. We've met some phenomenal people.
No doubt.
And then we started a little over a year ago, the Straight Outta Combat podcast. And met a lot of really cool people. I met James, in Dallas. I met Adam Bird in Dallas, who runs Heroes Media Group. I met Pete Turner, Special Forces guy through contacts. He's our editor on the West Coast. And we started, interviewing veterans, and some of the highlights, General Michael Flynn, Governor Ron DeSantis, Rocky Blyer, who won 4 Super Bowls. We started Straight Outta Combat Radio to tell the story of our veterans and to try to diminish the negative stereotypes of combat veterans. Because every time something happens, the first question the civilian world wants to know, was it a veteran? And all veterans are not trigger happy. They're not ready to explode. You can see Jeff and me, and they're just good, decent people who answered the call of duty for their country. And that's it. And so the show has been a blessing for me because it's helped me to overcome some of my stuff. When I hear what some of those people have been through, I'm like, really? When I look at Bobby Henline and I hear his story, and, Bobby was blown up by an IED in Iraq during the surge, and he lost 3 of his buddies, 82nd Airborne. And my gosh, the guy was burned from head to toe, and he turned it around and started becoming a comedian, the Well Done Comedian. Are you kidding me?
Hilarious, by the way, hilarious.
So when I think of Bobby Henline, I think my life's pretty damn good, and I appreciate his service, and my heart goes out to his lost buddies. But so that started, and then we started another project called Task Force Zen. It's still in the development stages, but that's a lot of people don't know, but we made a pitch to Richard Branson to try to make it to Necker Island, and we didn't make the cut. We asked him for a lot of money, and he said, it's not going to work this year, but redo it and come back and see us. So that was pretty cool. That was in November of last year. And then I started working on a project called What's Your Apocalypse? And you can go to what'syourapocalypse.com. And that's my personal methodology for recovery from whatever traumatic apocalyptic event happened to you. And, I've been working on it, and I'm calling it human prop therapy. And if you go there and you see what I do, it's crazy, Jeff. But I come out, you can't see anything. I'm wearing post-apocalyptic movie grade quality stuff with a weapon,
Yeah, I seen it.
I come out and basically every single piece of weaponry or clothing is either an addictive behavior or a bad emotion. And I strip everything off to a one-piece bodysuit of the human muscles, the musculature.
Yep.
And then I start getting dressed again. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I start getting dressed again. And every article of clothing, from my shoes to the hat that I wear, is a good behavior or a good practice. Yep. And so I go from, so I ask people, and I'd love to see this. Remember, see, you got me going. You remember the old Got Milk? Remember Got Milk?
Yeah.
Back in the day, everybody had the milk on their lips.
Mustache, yeah.
Imagine if we had a global moniker that asked people, what's your apocalypse? Mm-hmm. What happened to you and your life that's keeping you from living your life to the fullest? And imagine guys like you and me, and with the ladies and whoever, sharing heartfelt moments with a fellow human being that's willing to listen. And what's incredible about that is it's been guesstimated, I think there's 7.8 billion people or 8 billion people on the planet. 75% of them have been through at least one trauma. And it could be the loss of a loved one. It can be something that Bobby's been through, the things that we've been through. And over 35% of them have been multiple traumas. Right. So we have a target-rich human population that's broken. Yeah. And what I'd like to do with Task Force N and What's Your Apocalypse, I would like to connect dots between people that want the help to learn about modalities that can help them, but with the organizations and individuals that want to help them. So imagine if we create this global network of education, commerce, and healing that raises the bar and creates massive wealth, not only in commerce, we got to make money, we get that, of course, but in human healing. Yeah. And of course, it's one person can't do it, and you so well know this, Jeff, and I know James and many others know this, but a tight team of people networked in and dialed in can do just about anything. One person can change stuff. Yeah. 15 people on the same project, you can do just about anything. You literally could shift the axis of the planet, I think.
Yep. And I think that's an awesome movement, going forward. And I actually did go on. I obviously doing some research. I always like to know what I'm going to talk about, or at least who the person I'm going to talk to. And I looked up a lot of stuff, and it was interesting when I saw it. The picture itself of all the stuff that you were, I was like, what's this guy doing? Right. So I had to go through it, and I just kind of looked at some things, and it's really interesting. I mean, the concept is great. And I think that we're placing, it's like they've talked about reprogramming your brain, right? And it's kind of the same concept, but it's just about stripping yourself and going back and starting out from a foundational, just like your wife, coming back and starting a solid foundation and moving forward. It's great, man. I love it. Let me ask you this question, man. So just kind of going back to the one I had told you, as you got out of the military and you opened up the business, 23 years in that, you go through some traumatic stuff, you start doing straight out combat and Green Zone Hero. What qualities do you think that were best given to you by the military when you were in the Army? What is it that made you successful in these things as you become resilient and you're doing all this stuff where it's like you're getting knocked down? I mean, you're on a high horse, and you get knocked down. What qualities do you think, leadership qualities, did you gain from the military experience that made you successful?
Well, I know that's a great question, Jeff. Thank you for asking. As an NCO, as a non-commissioned officer in the United States Army, they taught me and all those NCOs how to take care of their people. And so what I learned very early as a buck sergeant, with some great Vietnam era veterans around me, how to take care of my brothers and sisters in my unit, my squad, and in my company. And, and that was probably the greatest quality they taught me, is how to care for my fellow soldiers. And then I never asked anybody that was a subordinate soldier to do anything that I wouldn't personally do. They taught me to lead by example. No doubt. Now, of course, as you go up the leadership, General Frank can't get out there and take off a tire off a 5-ton. But the reality is they And what that does is it creates a certain air of humility. So they taught me, the United States Army taught me humility. So teamwork and humility, taking care of your peers and those above you and below you, and never do anything. They drilled into my unit's esprit de corps. Yeah. Never do anything that would bring dishonor to the unit. And sometimes it's easier said than done when you like to go out with your platoon mates and you want to do crazy stuff at the local bar and eatery. But we never. That was drilled into me. Always be who you are, but be proud of who you are and be proud of the organization that you're in.
Right.
So they taught me esprit de corps, teamwork, how to make decisions. And they honed certain things that I think I may have had before I went in, which I probably got from God, but they honed charisma. Yeah. Charisma was one thing that they, when your peers rate you, all of my peers rated me that charisma was one of those leadership traits that I had. And I thank God for that, because charisma is what attracts people to you.
No doubt.
And when you have the right motives, then the people that come around you, they don't have to worry and they can trust. So by de facto, the United States Army taught me the important concept of trust. And if you can't trust the people around you, especially in a military situation, of course, I wasn't in combat, but people can get in trouble. They can die.
Oh yeah.
So you have to be trustworthy. And sometimes it's tough to go through the minefield of trust out there in the real world. Usually in the military, if you have to set up an ambush by 0900, you got to be there. You get that. Sometimes, people miss meetings out here. Of course, it's not life and death, but it's sometimes hard to trust. Just trust is a huge thing with me. So I don't know if that answered your question, but those 4 or 5 things is what my government, my army that I was in, our army gave me.
Yeah.
And
I got to tell you, I mean, listening to him, it goes back to our previous conversation as we were getting ready to come on, and just the importance of relationships, right? I mean, a lot of the things you were talking about when you talk about teamwork, but we talk about the technology that allows you and I to talk right now face to face, but the ability to actually, be around people and have that again, it goes back to genuine, all those things kind of that we talked about are going through the list of the things in which you're describing are being trustworthy, but being genuine, dependable, and just being loyal, right? All those things matter from a person, like a personal perspective, and that works great with that connection, that person to person. Business to business sounds good, but person to person gets things accomplished. And I love why it connects to what you're doing, because straight out of combat, when you talk to those people, you can hear it in the interviews, not just your interest in their story. I mean, because it is important, by the way, what you're doing, because you're allowing people to tell their story. It needs to be done. That's therapeutic. Anybody will tell you that it's therapeutic to have that conversation. So one, it's great what you're doing because of that, but you can hear it in your voice, your genuine interest in their story. And that's that connection that you have with them personally as you're having that conversation. Even if you never met them before, as you're having that conversation, I'm listening to it and I'm saying, man, John actually cares about his guest on the show. And this guy is actually interested in telling John about it. But that's awesome, man. I truly think it is perfect, man. It lines up exactly with who we are. This is where you're supposed to be, man. This is exactly where you're supposed to be. I believe that.
Well, I believe that too. And thank you for that, Jeff. And it is true, that my county here in Sarasota, here in Florida on the West Coast, the Republican Party wanted me to run for county commissioner about 8 years ago, right? Okay. And this is just a side story, but one of my best friends is an Army veteran. He's a major. He was in the reserves. He did a couple combat tours and was in Ramadi. And he told me when we were downtown at this luncheon and all the wealthy landowners were there, right? And they basically said, John, you're going to win the election. You have to say what you have to say to get in. Mm-hmm. But once you get in, you can kind of do what you want. So they weren't telling me that I could lie, but underneath the table, my Army buddy kicks me.
Yeah.
And he looks at me, and we got back in after our lunch, and we got back in the truck, and he said, they lost you, didn't they? And I said, yeah, they did.
Yeah.
And so the next day I called the Republican Party and just said I wasn't going to do it. Those weren't the people that were sitting there.
Right.
But I just said I wasn't going to do it. And what my friend told me to do, he said, John, do this. He's a major speaking to an NCO. He goes, go home today and write down 10 of your core values. Write them down.
Yeah.
And remember them. And if you live by these core values, it doesn't matter what you do the rest of your life, you're going to be good to go.
Yeah.
If you make a mistake and you get off track of one of those core values, find a way to get back to them.
Yeah.
But if you live by those core values, you're going to be good. And so that was like 2007. So here I was, late 40s, I guess, and late 40s, finally getting instruction from a good Army buddy about how to live life. And I think that I have to say my dad was tough on me. 28 years in the Army. He grew up on the rough side of the tracks in Pittsburgh, PA.
Okay.
His parents never spoke English. My grandfather was a foundry foreman in an open hearth steel mill for 47 years and never spoke English, but he raised 7 kids that all served the country. So we came from some we all do in America. If you look back at your family lineage, we've got legacies to hold up. And what my granddad did for 47 years to raise 7 kids, there's no way in hell that I'm going to leave this planet and not make a mark. So,
no doubt.
So, stay with your core values and you'll be good to go.
Outstanding. All right, brother. As we get ready to wrap up, what I want to do is I do this every show because although the content is good, and just so you know, I explain this every show because I want to make sure people hear it. The content that we just heard was awesome, and I love it. But the end is always my favorite because it's the humorous part. Like I love those stories where it's a you can't make it up story. So I want to take you back in your mind way back to 19 in between 86 and 89, and I want you to tell me a story that happened while you were in the military, while you were in the Army, and it could be while you were on the reserve side. And even if that's too far, which I don't think it is, John, for you to go back, if you can have a story that you can remember, that's just funny that you can tell. I just want to hear it relating to the military in some way. Now, don't incriminate yourself. Now,
so here I am. It's probably midsummer, Fort Carson. Weather's beautiful. 60% humidity. And I remember leaving post with a buddy of mine to go have lunch, right? And there's like 3 entrance ways. We all know what it's like to get on a military post. So we eat lunch. And I was always a stickler for following the speed limit, right? And so we got back on post. We had come in through the north gate and I was going the speed limit. And obviously the guy behind me must have been late to get back to his unit. And he was playing on his horn and I said, come on, dude, pass me. So he passes me and he flips me off. Right. So I'm like, okay, I flipped him off back. I didn't know, it's a typical reaction. Right.
Yeah.
So then that's it. And he disappears and we go to our post and I get out, we go to our unit, our barracks, and I get out, park the car. And I was with a PFC and we hop out. I was a sergeant. And all of a sudden this guy comes up behind me. He's an E7. And he's like, hey, Sergeant, did you just flip me off? And he's screaming it. Yeah. I'm thinking, what's wrong with this guy? Keep going. And so he's screaming and he's got me. I'm standing there listening to this guy and he's like bulging out in his neck muscles and veins. And I guess my first sergeant's window was open. Now, First Sergeant Suavia, no, it was Calejo. He was a Filipino first sergeant. First Cav, Vietnam veteran, a no shit first sergeant. No, most of them are.
Yeah.
Excuse the language.
Oh, you're good.
He comes outside. He hears this, and everybody's sticking their heads out of the barrack to watch me get read the riot act by this asshole E7. Excuse me, Lord. And my first sergeant came out, read him the riot act, and embarrassed him, and said to leave his NCO alone, and that if he ever came around those barracks again, he better have good reason because we own those barracks. We were the NBC battalion for the 3rd Brigade. And basically, and then I remember when the guy you could see him like this, and then he just shrivels up and leaves. And I'll never forget my first sergeant looks at me and he looks at me real close and he goes, don't ever flip anybody off. You got a free pass this time, Krotec. But that's a true story. And what it taught me was that when you have leadership like that, that will go to bat for something as stupid as flipping somebody off, you're in a good unit. And so it was funny. I wasn't really scared, but the guy was just an idiot. And it raised the elevation of our first sergeant in the eyes of all of those soldiers who were looking out of the barracks. And true story, I don't know who that guy was, but what an asshole.
Right.
If you're late, don't, I'm going the speed limit and you're going to get mad at me for following the rules.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know. I don't want to say what unit he was probably in. We want to keep it nice.
But that's the way it is, man. And I love that stuff, man. That's the stuff it's this made of, right? So those instances, right, when you can go back and you can look at why leaders are great, and that story perfectly represents a great leader, in my opinion. Is you come out, you always take up for your people, you stick up for them, you put your neck out on line. I mean, and then afterwards you say, hey, buddy, come here. Let me look. I can yell at this guy, but you can't yell at this guy. It's one of those things. It takes ownership. It takes pride in the people that you're with, and that's a great leadership characteristic and trait to have. But that's great, man. Great story. I love it. So before we head out, I'm gonna ask you one last thing. I want you to provide us wherever we can find you. If someone wants to say, hey, I want to know more about Green Zone Hero. I want to know more about Heroes Media. I want to know more about Straight Outta Combat radio. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put all these links, by the way, on the Facebook group when we're done, and share it so people actually can go see it. I want people to actually subscribe to the Straight Outta Combat radio, because that's awesome, great stories. And more importantly, for you that are watching, some of y'all have some stories that you might want to share. And if you want to share them, reach out to John and see if you guys can set it up, because I would love to hear your stories. But go ahead, John, tell us where we can find you, how I get a hold of you, how we can find all your stuff, because we want to hear it.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for that opportunity. And I just want to say that we've been trying to get James on the show for a couple of years too. But like you, we're all so busy. But first of all, my cell phone is 941-400-7333. 941-400-7333. You can call me. I'm Eastern Standard Time. I'm in Florida, and I'm old. I'm going to be 60 in a couple of weeks. Don't call me after 10 o'clock my time. Feel free to call me anytime you want. That's my personal cell phone number, and I will do my best to get back as soon as I can. My email address is john@greenzonehero.com. So if you can't reach me by phone and you have a question, just feel free to call me or to email me there. And then www.greenzonehero.com. Like I say, it's not a great user experience right now. We're working on it, but you can visit our website to see what we're doing there. And then we have Facebook links for Green Zone Hero, my own personal Facebook, John T. Krotec. The T's for Thomas. I'm a good Christian boy, and you can reach me there. We also have Straight Outta Combat Radio Facebook page, and we have Task Force Zen Facebook page. But you can reach me there, and then you can reach me. Go cell phone or email. But those are the places you can see me right now. We're working. And what'syouropocalypse.com. That's another platform that I built on GoDaddy. Took me like an hour to build it. I think it came out okay. But we're working on video right now. But I can tell you this, that if you have a question, if you're in a dark place, if you really want to know something, I'm available. And I absolutely love America. I think it's been built on strong principles and a firm foundation. I absolutely am crazy good about the men and women who have worn the uniform. There's, like you just said earlier, Jeff, that, we still have a mission. We might not be wearing the uniform, but we still have a mission, and we can be leaders for good in the civilian sector now. And it doesn't matter maybe what you did in the past. It's a whole new world out there, but use what you did in the past as the building bricks for the future. All I can say is guys like you motivate the hell out of me, because it's nice to see people out of uniform that know what it's all about. Dan Dwyer, Otis McGregor, Herb Thompson, and the list goes on. Peter Turner, our Army guys or SF guys, Scott Kinder down in Australia,
No
Stephen Kuhn, the list goes on. There's a lot of people out there. And even, Athena Ives and her story, and Kat Kalin and Kaylin Marie, and even the ladies that have worn the uniform just motivate me. So it's just nice to be part of those networks. And I can't say enough about this country and our veterans.
Outstanding. Well, hey, John, I truly appreciate the words. Thank you. I aim to motivate. I love doing it. I love seeing people's faces when they see it. It's one of those things that when you're genuine, you can only fake it till you make it so long. After a little bit, fake goes away, right? So I think that that people like you, everybody in which I've been talking to, which is who I surround myself with, are those people that they can't fake it. It's real. It's who they are. So anyhow, I appreciate you taking your time to come and share stories with us here, to share your insight and just be who you are. I'm hopeful that there's a lot of folks that are going to listen, that are going to join and listen to Straight Outta Combat Radio specifically, because I just feel that is such a therapeutic thing, right? I do. I listen to the stories and I just love it. I love what you're doing for the people that are out there. So
see, man, I'm glad you're thinking for me. So there you go. Thank you, Jeff, for that. So if you are a combat veteran, and we don't glorify this, we just tell your story, and you want to be on Straight Outta Combat Radio. I know 2 veterans right now that need to be on it. I'm looking at one, and then James, if he's still here. But seriously, email me, drop me a line. Let's tell your story, because you know what? If your story helps one person, and Jeff just pointed out, it's going to help me, and it's going to help you, and it's going to help the listeners. But if we can help one person, then the story is worth telling. Don't forget that it's important to others.
No doubt. All right, brother. With that being said, we're going to wrap it up. And hey, thank you again, man. And I will be talking to you shortly.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks, Jeff. You're right up the road, like 40 miles, man.
Man, it'll take less than 30 minutes. If we both left right now, we could see each other in 15 minutes, dude.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate that, Jeff. Keep doing what you're doing, man. Appreciate you, brother.
Hey, that's great, man. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you. So we'll see you next time on the other side.